What if the Cleveland Browns already made their decision on Dillon Gabriel and just haven't said it publicly yet? Because right now, everything around him is starting to shift fast. The trade rumors that once gave him a possible escape route are suddenly dead. The quarterback competition is getting more crowded, and while Gabriel fights to stay in the conversation, the attention inside Cleveland seems to be moving somewhere else entirely. Toward the future, toward upside, toward names like Shadur Sanders. Now, to be fair, nothing official has been announced. The Browns continue calling it an open competition. But when you look closely at the reports, the media discussion, and the way the organization is operating, it's hard not to feel like momentum is slipping away from Gabriel by the day. And in the NFL, once momentum disappears, careers can change incredibly fast. The real question now is simple. Does Dillon Gabriel still have time to flip the narrative? Or is Cleveland already preparing to move on? Just a few months ago, there was still a believable path forward for Dillon Gabriel. And honestly, it made sense. The rumors connecting him to the Atlanta Falcons started gaining real traction because it felt like the perfect reset opportunity. A new system, familiar coaching connections, less pressure, a chance to restart his NFL story before things became too complicated in Cleveland. For a while, people genuinely believed it could happen. Because when young quarterbacks struggle early, teams often look for clean exits instead of messy competitions. A trade gives everyone breathing room. The player gets another shot, and the original team quietly moves in a different direction. That's why the Atlanta speculation mattered so much. It wasn't just another rumor. It felt like a lifeline. But then something changed. Reports started making it clear the move wasn't happening. The buzz cooled down fast, insiders shifted tone, and suddenly the idea of Gabriel getting that fresh start basically disappeared overnight. And that's when the pressure really started. Because once the trade option died, Gabriel lost more than a possible destination. He lost flexibility. Now, instead of escaping the competition, he's stuck directly inside it. And that changes everything. Because quarterback battles in the NFL are brutal when momentum starts working against you. Once teams begin questioning long-term upside, every single practice becomes heavier. Every throw gets analyzed differently. Every mistake sticks longer. And according to growing reports and commentary surrounding the Browns' quarterback room, that's exactly the environment Gabriel is entering now. Now, to be fair, Cleveland has not publicly given up on him. The organization continues presenting the situation as an open competition, and no official decision has been announced. But perception matters in this league. And the perception around Gabriel has clearly shifted. Instead of talking about potential, more people are now talking about uncertainty. Questions about fit. Questions about ceiling. Questions about whether the Browns already see someone else as the future. That's a dangerous place for any young quarterback to be, especially because the NFL moves incredibly fast. One offseason you're viewed as a developmental piece with upside. The next offseason you're suddenly fighting just to stay relevant in the room. And what makes this even tougher is the timing. Because while Gabriel is trying to stabilize his position, the energy around Cleveland is moving in a completely different direction. Toward competition, toward long-term planning, toward quarterbacks creating excitement instead of questions. And once organizations start thinking that way, patience disappears very quickly. But the failed Falcons move wasn't actually the biggest problem for Gabriel. It was what started happening after the rumors died. Because that's when the criticism became impossible to ignore. Once the Atlanta rumors collapsed, the conversation around Dillon Gabriel changed almost immediately. And not in a good way. Before, people were still talking about upside, development, potential, the idea that maybe he simply needed a better situation or more time inside the system. But suddenly, the tone became much harsher. Now the focus shifted toward what he supposedly couldn't do. Reports and commentary started questioning his arm strength. Analysts debated whether he could consistently push the ball downfield at an NFL level. Others questioned whether his processing ability, once considered one of his strengths, would actually translate under real pressure. Now, to be fair, a lot of this remains opinion-based evaluation. None of these concerns automatically mean a quarterback can't develop or improve. But in the NFL, perception spreads fast. And once enough people start repeating the same concerns, those narratives become difficult to escape. That's exactly what makes this stage so dangerous for Gabriel. Because criticism alone doesn't end careers. Momentum does. Once a quarterback starts losing momentum publicly, every performance gets viewed through a different lens. Good throws become expected. Bad throws become proof. And suddenly, the margin for error almost disappears. That's the feeling surrounding Gabriel right now. Especially because the Browns' quarterback room isn't slowing down around him. Competition keeps increasing. Expectations keep growing. And according to growing reports, Cleveland appears to be evaluating the position with a much bigger long-term vision in mind. That matters, because when teams are searching for a future answer at quarterback, patience becomes extremely limited for players who aren't clearly separating themselves. And right now, Gabriel doesn't seem to have that separation. Again, that's not an official team statement, but it's the direction many analysts and insiders appear to be leaning toward. You can even feel the shift in how people talk about him now. Earlier discussions sounded hopeful. Current discussions sound uncertain. That's a massive difference. And uncertainty at quarterback is one of the most dangerous positions a player can be in. Because once coaches start hesitating, depth charts change quickly. One shaky preseason drive can suddenly outweigh weeks of solid practice. One poor decision can reinforce every criticism already floating around online. That's how brutal the NFL becomes for young quarterbacks fighting to stay relevant. But here's the part that makes this even harder for Gabriel. The criticism isn't happening in isolation. Because while questions around his game continue growing, another quarterback is still dominating attention inside the building. And whether fans like it or not, the Browns continue treating him like a very real option moving forward. That changes the entire competition. Because now Gabriel isn't just fighting criticism anymore. He's fighting established hierarchy too. And once that happens, things can spiral fast. This is where the situation becomes brutal for Dillon Gabriel. Because criticism is one thing, but losing ground inside the quarterback room while it's happening, that's when careers start changing fast. The Cleveland Browns continue describing the situation as an open competition, which sounds fair on the surface. Coaches say everyone will get opportunities. Reps are being distributed. No starter has officially been named. But in the NFL, open competition doesn't always mean equal momentum. And right now, the momentum inside that room feels very uneven. Because despite everything that's happened over the past few seasons, Deshaun Watson is still being treated like a serious contender within the organization. That matters more than people realize. Veteran quarterbacks don't just compete for jobs, they influence the entire structure of the room. They get longer evaluations, more patience, more opportunities to recover from struggles. And when a veteran still has organizational backing, younger quarterbacks immediately face a tougher reality. They don't just need to compete. They need to clearly outperform. That's the challenge Gabriel is facing right now. And according to reports and insider discussions surrounding the Browns, Watson continues receiving meaningful opportunities to prove he can still lead the offense moving forward. Again, none of this guarantees Watson wins the job, but it changes the dynamic dramatically. Because now Gabriel isn't competing in a neutral environment anymore. He's competing against experience, reputation, and organizational investment. That's an incredibly difficult combination to overcome, especially while public criticism continues building at the same time. And here, where things get even more complicated. When coaches constantly use phrases like "competition remains open," it can actually signal uncertainty rather than confidence. Sometimes that means nobody has fully claimed the role. But other times, it means somebody is quietly falling behind. That's why every practice suddenly feels heavier for Gabriel. Every rep becomes evaluation. Every mistake becomes evidence. And when that happens inside a crowded quarterback room, the pressure multiplies fast. Because quarterbacks don't get judged independently. They get compared directly against the people standing beside them. Who processes faster? Who commands the offense better? Who creates confidence? Who looks like the future? That last part is especially important. Because while Watson still commands attention as a veteran option, there's another name inside this entire situation, changing the energy around Cleveland completely. A name creating excitement instead of uncertainty. A name pulling attention from fans, media, and analysts all at once. Shadur Sanders. And whether people admit it publicly or not, that growing attention changes everything for Gabriel. Because once a franchise starts becoming emotionally invested in future upside, players stuck in the middle often become the easiest ones to move past. And right now, that's exactly the danger surrounding Gabriel's position in Cleveland. This might be the biggest problem facing Dillon Gabriel right now. The conversation around Cleveland no longer feels focused on him. It feels focused on the future. And that future increasingly revolves around Shadur Sanders. You can feel the shift happening everywhere. Fan discussions, media coverage, analyst conversations, social media reactions. The energy is completely different whenever Shadur's name enters the conversation. Because unlike Gabriel, the narrative around Shadur is built around possibility, potential, excitement, upside. That matters in the NFL more than people realize. Teams don't just evaluate quarterbacks based on what they are today. They evaluate what they could become tomorrow. And when a player starts generating belief inside a fan base, momentum builds incredibly fast. That's exactly what's happening here. Now, to be fair, none of this officially means the Browns have chosen Shadur over anyone else. The organization continues publicly describing the quarterback room as competitive and open. But perception inside football matters almost as much as reality. And right now, the perception surrounding Shadur feels like growth. The perception surrounding Gabriel feels like survival. That's a dangerous contrast. Because once one quarterback starts representing the future, everybody else in the room immediately feels temporary. Especially developmental players already fighting criticism. And here's what makes the timing even worse for Gabriel. The NFL is obsessed with upside. Organizations constantly convince themselves they can unlock the next great quarterback if they see enough flashes, confidence, or raw talent. That's why younger quarterbacks creating excitement receive longer patience windows. Fans dream bigger. Coaches become more invested. Media coverage becomes more optimistic. Everything changes. And according to growing conversations around Cleveland, that emotional investment around Shadur keeps getting stronger. Again, this doesn't guarantee he becomes the starter tomorrow, but it absolutely affects the environment around the position. Because once a franchise starts leaning emotionally toward potential, players caught in uncertainty become vulnerable very quickly. That's the position Gabriel appears trapped in now. Not fully established, not fully trusted, and now competing against a quarterback, generating genuine excitement at the exact same moment his own momentum is fading. That combination is brutal, especially because football decisions aren't always made purely on statistics or practice reps. Sometimes they're influenced by belief. Belief in who can elevate the franchise. Belief in who can energize the locker room. Belief in who fans want to rally behind moving forward. And right now, much of that emotional momentum appears to be drifting toward Shadur, which creates another major problem for Gabriel. Because in the NFL, timing can destroy careers just as quickly as poor performance can. And honestly, the timing surrounding this entire situation could not be worse for him. The hardest part about the NFL isn't always talent. Sometimes it's timing. And right now, the timing surrounding Dillon Gabriel feels almost impossible to overcome. Because if this exact situation happened a year earlier, maybe the Browns would have had more patience. Maybe the organization would have focused more heavily on long-term development. Maybe Gabriel would have received a cleaner runway to grow through mistakes. But that's not where Cleveland is anymore. Now the franchise feels caught between urgency and future planning at the same time. You still have Deshaun Watson trying to prove he can reclaim his place. You have growing excitement around Shadur Sanders and future upside. And somewhere in the middle sits Gabriel, trying to hold onto relevance while everything around him shifts. That's a brutal position for any young quarterback. Because once teams start emotionally investing in other directions, patience disappears fast. And here's the reality most fans don't talk about. A player doesn't always lose his job because he completely fails. Sometimes he loses it because someone else represents a more exciting future. That's what makes this so dangerous for Gabriel. The Browns don't necessarily need him to collapse in order to move on. They simply need to believe somebody else offers more upside. And according to growing reports and conversations surrounding the organization, that possibility is becoming more real by the day. Again, none of this has been officially confirmed by the Browns themselves. But the signals feel hard to ignore. The attention shifting elsewhere. The uncertainty growing louder. The lack of strong public confidence surrounding Gabriel compared to the growing excitement around other quarterbacks in the room. All of it creates pressure, and pressure changes how players are evaluated. Suddenly, every preseason throw feels heavier. Every mistake feels amplified. Every shaky moment starts reinforcing existing criticism. That's why timing matters so much. Because if Gabriel entered this offseason with strong momentum, maybe those mistakes would be viewed as part of normal development. But when momentum is already slipping, mistakes become confirmation. And confirmation spreads quickly in the NFL, especially when coaches and front offices are trying to make long-term decisions under pressure. That's the stage Cleveland appears to be entering now. No more experimenting. No more endless waiting. Soon, the Browns will have to start deciding who actually fits their vision moving forward. Who gives them stability? Who gives them upside? Who gives them belief? And for Gabriel, that creates one terrifying reality. He may be running out of time before he ever truly gets a fair chance to recover the narrative around him. But despite everything happening right now, there's still one thing keeping this story alive. Because preseason changes everything. And for players fighting to survive, sometimes one performance is enough to flip the entire conversation. This is the point where talk stops mattering. Because once preseason arrives, narratives finally collide with reality. And for Dillon Gabriel, that might be the last thing keeping this entire situation alive. Right now, there's still uncertainty surrounding the Browns' quarterback room. Coaches continue using careful language. No final starter has officially been locked in. Publicly, the organization is still leaving the door open. But once preseason games begin, everything speeds up. That's when depth charts start becoming real. That's when coaches stop projecting potential and start evaluating results. And for quarterbacks fighting to survive crowded competitions, preseason becomes brutal. Every throw matters. Every drive gets analyzed. Every mistake follows you back to the sideline, especially for players already carrying negative momentum. That's why this next stretch feels so important for Gabriel. Because despite all the criticism, all the speculation, and all the growing attention around other quarterbacks, he still has one opportunity left to change perception directly on the field. And honestly, that's the beauty of football. One strong performance can completely flip a narrative. One sharp preseason game can suddenly force coaches to reevaluate everything. Fans change opinions fast. Media changes tone fast. Organizations change direction fast. That's why nobody inside Cleveland can fully close the book on Gabriel yet. Not officially. Because if he steps onto the field and suddenly looks sharper, more confident, more explosive, the entire conversation changes immediately. Now instead of, can he survive the roster? The discussion becomes, did people give up on him too early? That's how quickly momentum flips in the NFL. But here's the scary part. The opposite is also true. Because if the same concerns show up again, shaky timing, struggles pushing the ball downfield, hesitation under pressure, then the criticism surrounding him becomes almost impossible to defend anymore. And when teams feel confirmed in their doubts, decisions happen very quickly. No dramatic announcement. No emotional goodbye. Just a quiet roster update that changes a player's career overnight. That's the reality Gabriel is approaching now. And what makes it even harder is the environment around him keeps getting louder. The excitement around Shadur Sanders isn't slowing down. The evaluation of Deshaun Watson continues. The Browns are clearly trying to identify long-term direction at quarterback. That means every preseason rep carries extra weight. Because this isn't just about making the roster anymore. It's about convincing the organization you belong in their future plans at all. And in the NFL, future value matters more than almost anything else. That's why this upcoming stretch could define Gabriel's entire career trajectory. Because if he delivers under pressure, he buys himself time. But if he does, the Browns may already know exactly what comes next. At some point, every NFL team stops asking, who can help us right now? And starts asking something much bigger. Who fits our future? That's the stage the Cleveland Browns appear to be entering now. Because when you step back and look at everything happening inside this quarterback situation, it no longer feels like a simple competition between players. It feels like an organization trying to define its next identity. And that changes how every quarterback gets evaluated. Not just by talent, but by vision. That's why the situation surrounding Dillon Gabriel feels so dangerous. Because even if he improves, even if he has moments during preseason, the real question may already be bigger than individual performance. Does he fit what the Browns want to become moving forward? That's what makes this difficult. Because NFL front offices don't just look for quarterbacks who can survive. They look for quarterbacks who can transform direction. Players who energize the locker room. Players who create long-term belief. Players who make organizations feel stable again. And according to growing reports and speculation surrounding Cleveland, the Browns appear increasingly focused on long-term upside rather than short-term uncertainty. Again, that's not an official statement from the organization. But when you look at how conversations around the quarterback room continue evolving, the signals feel hard to ignore. More excitement surrounding youth. More discussion about potential. More attention toward players viewed as future-focused options. That's the environment Gabriel is trying to survive in right now. And honestly, it's one of the hardest environments possible for a developmental quarterback. Because once teams emotionally invest in future upside, patience for maybe players disappears quickly, especially at quarterback. That's why the energy around names like Shadur Sanders matters so much here. Even beyond statistics or reps, he represents possibility. And NFL franchises chase possibility aggressively. Meanwhile, Gabriel increasingly feels trapped in uncertainty. Not enough established success to feel safe. Not enough explosive momentum to dominate the conversation. Just stuck in between. And in football, in between is dangerous. Because organizations eventually choose direction. And once that direction becomes clear internally, roster decisions start happening fast. That's why many insiders and analysts believe this upcoming stretch could quietly decide Gabriel's future before the public even realizes it. Not because he completely failed, but because Cleveland may already be leaning toward a different long-term vision entirely. And if that's true, then Gabriel isn't really competing against one quarterback anymore. He's competing against the future itself, which leads to the biggest question of all. Has the league already started moving on from him before his NFL story ever truly had the chance to begin? Right now, Dillon Gabriel feels stuck in the harshest position an NFL player can face. Not completely out, but no longer secure either. The failed trade rumors, the growing criticism, the crowded quarterback room, and the rising excitement around Shadur Sanders have all combined into one dangerous reality. The Browns may already be thinking beyond Gabriel. Now, to be fair, nothing official has happened yet. Cleveland still calls this an open competition, and preseason could absolutely change the conversation if Gabriel delivers when it matters most. That's the one thing keeping this story alive. Because the NFL changes fast. One breakout performance can revive belief. One strong preseason game can force coaches to rethink everything. But the opposite is true too. If the same concerns continue showing up, the Browns won't hesitate forever. Teams chasing long-term stability at quarterback rarely wait once they believe a different future is available. And honestly, that may be the biggest lesson in this entire situation. Sometimes careers don't fall apart because a player completely fails. Sometimes the league simply moves toward someone else faster. Now the pressure is fully on Gabriel. Every rep matters. Every throw matters. Every preseason moment matters. Because this upcoming stretch may not just decide whether he starts for Cleveland. It may decide whether Cleveland still sees him as part of the future at all. And that's why the biggest question still hasn't been answered. Does Dillon Gabriel still have one moment left to flip the narrative? Or has the NFL already quietly moved on?